Welcome to our ongoing coverage of VMworld 2020. Today I have the pleasure of having Blair Parkhill in the studio with us today. He's the US Product Director for Login VSI. How's it going today?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Good to be in the virtual studio, and I can't complain. In the mountains of Colorado here, we got pretty nice weather, and everybody's healthy. So thanks for asking.
Glad to have you.
And Blair, as Brian said, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. I wanted to just jump right into it, and if you could, to kick things off, maybe just give us a quick overview of the company.
Sure. Well, Login VSI is a Dutch-based company, a global company as well. And we were born from kind of the roots of a consulting organization where we, our expertise was in the Citrix realm, as well as VDI very strongly. So that's kind of our roots. And the company itself has been developing a technology based on a virtual user for various types of testing for quite some time, 10, 12 years now. And we made a huge jump in the vendor market where our technology was used for testing and benchmarking their scalability, primarily with SSDs at the time. And so our name really spread like wildfire during that period as people kind of vetted these new technologies on VDI. And so that's kind of shifted from the vendor world to the enterprise world, where we're seeing Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies knocking on our door wanting to do some testing with their VDI and RDSH-based environments to really change the impact or test the impact of change in pre-production and production types of environments. So, and we could jump into that a little bit more later.
Sure. And we appreciate you joining us for this digital version of VMworld 2020. Obviously, the show went digital this year for obvious reasons. What are your thoughts on these digital events versus the traditional, trade shows that we're used to?
Yeah, well, I think we all miss being able to see each other and kind of look each other in the eyes physically. And I don't think there's any real replacement for that, right? So the relationship part of the whole digital versus physical, I think, suffers a little bit. And trade shows I find to be incredibly immersive. So, you're getting out of the distractions and going into a whole new kind of world of distractions, but in a way that's very focused on the technology at hand. And it's vendors like us being able to mix with customers, and that's huge for us, and we miss that a lot. But there's also something nice about being able to consume some really good content from the comforts of your own home. To be able to have a coffee, drink a beer, whatever it is that you like, while you're consuming some great content from VMware and a lot of their partners, I think is pretty cool too. And myself, I like to roam around the world as I work. I call myself a digital nomad, and so being able to do it here from my Colorado home or my Costa Rica home is certainly quite nice, not to have to miss a trade show for those reasons. So yeah, I'd say it kind of sucks, but at the same time, I think we can see the kind of the silver lining around all of it.
Yeah, and kind of, going hand in hand, the whole, missing people, interacting with people. The other major shift that we're living in right now is this whole work from home paradigm shift. What are your thoughts on, working from home, and how's that changed things for your company?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I've been working remotely since I joined Login VSI over 6 years ago. So that's not really been much of an impact. In fact, being able to work remotely allows me to work from any one of the two locations that I'm typically living in, either Costa Rica or Colorado. But despite that, I think the enterprise customers that we service are feeling it a lot more than I am. primarily those that may not have really dove into virtualization and kind of, a virtual desktop, published apps, things like that. I think they're the ones that really had a challenge, but those that did have, I'd say, mature virtualization solutions were able to kind of jump that gap a little easier and keep the business running. The one area that I've been interested in, and maybe you guys have heard about it too, but I've kind of been wondering, if customers had an on-prem type of solution and they're not allowed to, go into the office and they've got to quarantine themselves at home, how do you maintain a lab like that? And certainly virtualization helps, and things like HP ILO allows you to help when you can't be there in the lab. But I think that might be fueling kind of a big rush towards the cloud, kind of almost a catalyst, as it were, pushing people towards the cloud a lot faster.
Yeah. And as we're here talking about VMworld, can you maybe go into the relationship between Login VSI and VMware and how you guys partner together?
Sure. Yeah. And this has been something that has really heated up for us over the last, 9 months or so. And that has to do with kind of two worlds that we work with VMware in. Number one, as a vendor, they certainly have an incredible technology when it comes to end user compute. And one way to validate that technology is by using our benchmarking software, either Login VSI or now our new product, Login Enterprise, to kind of evaluate the performance, the scalability, and really, be able to give their customers a lot of numbers around the solutions that they can put together. So we do work with VMware pretty heavily in terms of generating those reference architectures using our software. But we also work with their customers, and we kind of partner in the field to do that kind of in the field, whether it's a greenfield solution or kind of a migration. Maybe a customer is moving from one technology to Horizon, and they'd like to be able to validate, how do they compare, right? So they're using our software to do that. But we also get to work with VMware as an enterprise customer as well. So we have a few projects that we've been working with them on where they're actually evaluating some of their production level systems using our software to kind of, determine the impact of change in a system, or make sure it's capable of handling a certain amount of load from outside in.
Yeah, and you kind of already talked about it a little bit, but maybe if you could dive in a little deeper into the technology, what you guys provide, and maybe talk about how it's unique or it's differentiated in the marketplace.
Sure. Yeah, there really aren't too many offerings that are like ours. We have a little bit of competition, I'd say, but our unique value, the software that we produce, it all centered around what we call a virtual user. And a virtual user is like a human user in a lot of ways, in the fact that it can open up applications on a desktop or a workspace. It can interact with those applications and log on, log off, and do all those things. And as you might imagine, if I am trying to evaluate, let's say, a new solution I'm putting in place, it's much easier for me to be able to deploy thousands of virtual users than it would to try and corral thousands of human users, and then ask those human users to kind of do the same thing over and over again so they can evaluate the impact of that change. So being as consistent as it is and very robotic in a way, a virtual user allows any customer of ours to be able to determine the impact of change by taking a baseline, throwing these virtual users at the system to see how it performs, making that change, and then doing that again to see how they compare. And our technology and these virtual users are able to do 3 different types of tests now. Number one is more of an application acceptance test, where a virtual user will log in. It'll run through the application workflow where it can interact with multiple applications in one workflow. And when that's done, it produces a report. It tells you, what applications were able to start successfully, but also, how did that application perform in that one quick acceptance test. And it gives our customers an ability to test, hundreds of applications in minutes or hours, and then have a report that helps them to figure out, okay, we made this change, maybe only 5% of the applications, suffered from this change. We know what they are because we just did this application acceptance test. Let's go fix those and run it again. So that's the first type of test. The second type of test is a load test, and that's the one that we're very well known for, right? Benchmark testing at scale really helps us to understand, how a system can scale when it's under pressure. And then what happens when the system reaches full utilization? How does that impact the user experience, whether from an application perspective or a desktop workspace perspective? I consider both of those tests to be one that would happen in more of a pre-production environment. But if we have a production environment and we'd like to use this virtual user technology to measure the success and the performance of that production environment, we have what we call continuous testing, where virtual users can log in from anywhere in the world to any workspace solution in the world, and basically provide metrics on availability and performance. As you can imagine, if a virtual user starts complaining about performance getting a little slower, that virtual user should be able to figure out, changes in terms of milliseconds, right? So if a virtual user feels that something's slowing down, that should happen before any human user really sees that. The benefit here is that our customers have an ability to jump on top of that problem before it really starts to impact productivity. So as we've said in the past, it's kind of like a canary in a coal mine. So there's the application acceptance, the load testing, and then the continuous testing, which are all part of one product now that we call Login Enterprise.
Now, it was great to hear about your products. Normally during VMworld, this is a time when a lot of companies announce new product updates or new features and stuff like that. Is there anything that Login VSI has recently announced?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Login Enterprise is a pretty new product. In the past, we've had Login VSI, we've had Login PI, Login AM, Login AT. We've had a few different products that we put out to market. So if you take all of these great ideas and mash them into one architecture, and 3 different types of test cases that I spoke about in your last question, that's what Login Enterprise is. And it's all based on a microservices architecture, super easy to use. In the past, it was a little complex to get these things up and running. So Login Enterprise is basically one product now that can cover 3 different use cases, and it's built for the cloud. So if I have testing that I want to perform on, WVD or, Azure, for example, Login Enterprise is certainly much more capable of doing that. And in fact, doing this type of testing in WVD has been something I've been responsible for over the last year. So I've spent many hours really pushing Azure instances with WVD images or Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session images. I've just been testing that quite a bit over the last 9 months to a year, and have been able to kind of figure out the performance profile of those offerings. And this certainly helps Microsoft to determine how do we want to optimize those images, and it helps our enterprise customers a lot too, because they want to know for this many users that I want to support, and with my my urge to get to the cloud quite quickly, what does that look like for me? How scalable is that going to be for my customers that use my platform and are trying to do this in the cloud? So, Login Enterprise has really kind of paved the road towards all of that, and it's been real interesting to see a lot of the test data that comes back from testing something like WVD, and of course, with Horizon. Working on Azure in a WVD context, that certainly has benefited a lot of the VMware customers as well. In fact, we've been working in the field with some of our VMware partners and VMware themselves to kind of track down this performance profile. So it's been quite fun.
Well, this is great. Is there any way maybe we can get a quick demo, have you share your screen and show us what the product looks like?
I think so, yeah. The nice thing about my demo is it's in the cloud, so I can go anywhere in the world and give you the same demo. So yeah, let's hop on over there.
All right.
So what we have here is my test environment. This is located in, let's see, this is US East 2 in Azure. And what I'm doing with our product Login Enterprise is testing the scalability of a new instance that Azure offers, which is the D series, and it's the DS instance V4, which is based on the Cascade Lake processors. And as you might imagine, I should see a better performance with Cascade Lake than I would for the V3 instances, which could be Haswell, Broadwell, or Skylake, right? So I have a number of customers that are interested in what that performance profile looks like between V3 and V4. And so that's what you see running here. So what I could do is take you through, how did I achieve this test, and kind of how do I compare some of the results to find out how these perform when compared to each other. So, but the first thing I'd like to show you is Login Enterprise itself. Login Enterprise, it's a virtual appliance. You can import it into vSphere quite easily. You can import it into Azure as well, very easily. In fact, there's no need to deploy a Windows machine, install our software, or anything like that. You just deploy the virtual appliance, answer 4 or 5 questions during its first startup. And after answering those, it's going to reboot a couple of times and then give you a user interface just like you see here. All I have to do is enter the username and password that I configured in my initialization. And here's the home page to Login Enterprise. As I talked about before, there are 3 different types of use cases here. And you can see it kind of works in a clockwork fashion. Here in the results side, you can see application testing. And again, this is the type of testing I would use to evaluate an image of some sort. So if I'm testing Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session version 1909, and I want to see, how that performs with the applications that I'm going to be running on that image, I would run this. And it's kind of like an application acceptance test where I could run that test once and then figure out which ones work and which ones don't. Of course, this happens in pre-production. And then once I really kind of tune up that image, get it really performing well and all that stuff, and making sure that my applications all work, then I can move into the load testing. Again, this will normally happen in a pre-production type of environment. And for me in Azure, I want to test this instance and see how many user sessions I can scale on one Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session instance. So I'm going to use load testing to really load it up with a large number of users to find out where that breakpoint is, where user experience really starts to fall off. And then lastly, once we kind of tune up that image and check our scalability, we push that into production, and we use continuous testing to make sure that this resource is always available and always performing well from the perspective of a virtual user, which is very consistent and all that good stuff. So that's Login, the Login Enterprise, and kind of the change management workflow. It almost like it overlays on a DevOps type of workflow, which is pretty cool. Now, right now, what I'm doing is I'm performing a load test on an Azure D4DS V4 instance running Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session 2004. It's been optimized, and it's using all the Microsoft 365 apps. Now, if I want to do a test, I've got to configure a few things. I have to have some user accounts. These user accounts are going to reside in AD. And I can build those user accounts in Login Enterprise to be able to make that connection. I also have launchers. Now, launchers are something that can be global. A launcher is basically tasked with opening up a session from the launcher to the workspace, and that workspace can be in the cloud, it can be on-prem, it can be wherever. And the launcher can be on an iGel device, it can be on a Linux device, it can be on a Windows device, whatever works for you. And so the launcher, all you do is download the binaries you need for that. And as soon as you start that software, it'll automatically register with Login Enterprise and be ready for service. So as you can imagine, if I'm doing a load test, I'd have a bunch of launchers that I'm loading up with sessions and really hitting the back end pretty hard. If I'm doing continuous testing in a production type of environment, I might have a launcher in Chicago, one in New Delhi, one in London, one in Amsterdam, one in Seattle. I could have these launchers located around the world where all of them make connection to their respective data centers, whether that's, again, in the cloud or on-prem. And then lastly, we have a bunch of applications that we can create into a logical workflow that a typical production user would go through. And these applications, there's a script per application. It's quite easy to script to those. I won't take you into the details there, for the purposes of kind of keeping to our time. But when you take these three components, the user account, the launcher, and the applications, then what we could do is create a test. And I can show you how we configure one of our tests here. You basically just give it the broker or host that you want to connect to. And of course, we support VMware Horizon View as a connection type that we can make from a launcher to a target backend. So you basically put in the same kind of information, the host or the broker that we want to connect to. If there's a particular resource we want the virtual user to connect to, whether it's an application or a desktop, we can put that here if necessary. And we can select the user accounts that we want to use for those tests, the launchers that we want to use, and the display configuration. And once you have that stuff set up, then you can basically tell it, how do I want to log in? If it's a continuous test, I want to log in every minute, maybe every 5 minutes, run through my workflow and log off. If it's a load test, I can configure it to start up 16 sessions in 16 minutes perhaps, and then run it for 30 minutes as a way of generating a load. And then if you look at the list of actions here, this is the workflow that the virtual user will go through to simulate that human kind of interaction with the workspace. And of course, you can order those however you wish, really quite easy to do. And then for the continuous testing, this is where you'd want to have some type of notification if an application slowed down or became unavailable, or even the user can't even log into the backend resource. Now, we have thresholds if it's a performance type of metric. If it's over the threshold, you'll get an alert as an operations staff. If an application becomes unavailable, again, operations team will be notified, and we could set those thresholds here. So again, it's a really good way to make sure that the operations team has an opportunity to get in front of a problem before the human users will kind of feel that productivity impact. So that's how you stitch a test together. It's just become so much easier with this Login Enterprise product versus our previous products. And we have lots of enterprise accounts that will confirm the same thing, right? Moving from our legacy or our classic Login VSI product to Login Enterprise has been great for them. Now, once I have this set up and I fire it off, then it's going to do the type of test that we've requested it to do on the back end. And if we flip back here, I can kind of walk you through what you might be seeing. Now, right here, you can see my session host is currently working pretty hard. These red lines are CPU utilization, and I'm pegging the processor to the max on this D4 DS V4 instance running Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. What you see here on the right side is the dashboard for Login Enterprise. I can see that my, I've been able to fire off the right number of tests. I know that all the virtual users have logged in and started their work successfully. And I know that there have been some fallout in terms of the applications that are running. So these are all things that we're looking for when we try and stress the system on the back end. And in these bottom two panes, you can see the virtual users doing their work. On the left-hand side, a virtual user is watching a streaming video, for example, in a web browser. In this case, this web browser is Microsoft Edge. It's the 83, so it's the Chromium-based version. And then on the right side, you can see I have a user that's logging into Microsoft Word. You can see my virtual user recognize the fact that the product that it's using has not been activated. So I just had the virtual user hit escape so it could go and play with Word a little bit. And all of this is generating kind of a workload on the back end. And so let's take a little bit more of a peek into a launcher so you can see how that works. So a launcher is, again, tasked with creating a session from wherever it's located to the back end or to the resource that is hosting its either desktop or applications. And this right here is our launcher application. The launcher application, you get the launcher's host name. This is the URL of the virtual appliance. Everything that we do is done over HTTPS. There's no need for any specific ports or anything anymore. It's very, comfortable working within the cloud. And so this launcher, as soon as it fires up, it's going to go over those web ports. It's going to hit the virtual appliance and register with that virtual appliance. As soon as it's registered, it just waits for an instruction. And here you can see that it's been asked to connect to this particular environment with this user account. And I can see how long ago that started. So, the launcher is a very easy thing to get up and running. And again, you can see once it's launched and once it's logged in, then the virtual user is going through and using these applications in almost a human way. So here you can see the virtual user is using Outlook, and we support all of the Microsoft apps. In fact, we have a repository of pre-built application scripts, so you don't have to do any of that scripting yourself. That's nice. If I'm an enterprise that wants to test this, I can just grab all those Microsoft 365 scripts off the shelf, plug them into my test environment and start running them. If I want to modify it, maybe to use OneDrive, or maybe I want to use Teams or something like that, I can always modify those too. So it really saves our customers quite a bit of time. And if you guys are interested in testing anything in Azure or Horizon whatsoever, this becomes a really easy platform to find out some of those answers we might not have. The example here is Windows Virtual Desktop is still a relatively new platform, and Microsoft's changing it every day. They're optimizing it. As we saw at the end of July, beginning of August, they released their spring update, which took us into the world of Azure Resource Manager, and things started to really change around that program. So with all of this change, we don't really know how all of this stuff is going to perform for us. We don't know what's going to happen when we move our enterprise workflows into Azure on a Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session instance. So what better way to get all these answers than to test it yourself, and to do so with these virtual users that can be deployed in a matter of minutes or seconds. So that's the the product in a nutshell. That's what I wanted you guys to see today. And of course, I'm always here if anybody wants a deeper dive.
Well, thanks for giving us a great demo of your products. Where can people go if they want to get a deeper dive and find out more about your offerings?
Sure. Yeah, it's super easy. www.loginvsi.com. If you're interested in kind of using a trial, you just hit the downloads page, download it, and you can use it free for 5 days. If you want a longer trial, just hit us up. Our account reps will be happy to extend that trial a little bit so that you can get an idea of how things perform that you're testing. I will say that we do have something called the WVD Starter Kit. So if we have those of you that want to give this product a try and you want to do something like Horizon on WVD, then go download that starter kit and you can get started. We have lots of blogs and other resources on our webpage that'll help you get started with that. Our goal here is to make it as easy as possible for you to get the information you need.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Hey, you got it. Stay safe. It's great talking to you. I'm going to miss all you guys that are watching this at VMworld. I'm going to miss you guys, and we'll look forward to seeing you very, very soon.
Sounds good. Thanks again. We appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more of these VMblog videos, please hit the like button and subscribe. And it's important, if you want to get notified the next time we post a video, please hit the subscribe and the bell notification.